Minnesota, that we saw all across the country. And we had a peaceful protest here in Myrtle Beach. And a bunch of young men and women got arrested, and we took on the cases pro bono because the First Amendment matters. And it was like one of the biggest accomplishments, but also like joys that we got to help people in that way.
You know, I always joke, but it's not a joke. We're defenders of the Constitution.
Yeah.
As defense attorneys, you are, one of your main roles is to be a defender of the Constitution. And this group of cases really allowed us to do that.
Yeah.
The First Amendment gives us the right to peaceably assemble and to petition our government for redress of grievances. And what that means is we can peaceably assemble and tell our government when we have problems. And at the point when George Floyd was murdered, when we take it back to 2 years ago, there was a whole string of African Americans who were murdered at the hands of police for no reason.
Right.
You know, the media can tell you it was all kinds of reasons, but it was for no reasons. Breonna Taylor was killed just a few weeks before, I think less than 2 weeks before George Floyd was then murdered by police. And so just 6 days after George Floyd's murder and this whole string of individuals who were killed at the hands of police brutality, citizens from all around the country decided to protest.
Ahmed was one of those too, right?
Yeah.
Ahmed Arbery, or was that his name?
Aubrey came after.
It came like a couple days after, yeah.
Okay.
And so when they were protesting in Myrtle Beach, even though maybe in other parts of the country it had gotten contentious, I would say, in Myrtle Beach, they were peaceably protesting when all of our clients were arrested.
Yeah, and I know like the first thing everybody thinks is we think of like New York, right, where people are like throwing things and looting. There was none of that going on here at all. They were peacefully protesting. They were saying words that the police officers didn't like no justice, no peace. Like we were, police brutality is real. Like these are the things that happen here, and it made them feel very uncomfortable. And then, and they didn't like it. The police didn't like it. And so, we saw these people get arrested for the things they were saying. And like the First Amendment matters. Freedom of speech is like honored and cherished. And we take an oath to uphold the Constitution. So, we like geeked out a little bit, like excited about defending the Constitution.
I'm confused. Like what happened on that day? What was kind of the
catalyst?
Well, yeah, like what happened to get them arrested and how did that escalate like that?
So everything, it started off that morning, like super chill, like just walking and
the clients
singing
and other members of Myrtle Beach, they met at City Hall. They had kind of like a summit, like a forum where they talked about what was going on. And then they decided that they were going to walk in protest at the same time. They were joined by police officers, the chief of police, and they walked with them and guided them along the streets of Myrtle Beach, peaceably protesting. Later in the afternoon, they started to go back towards Joe White Avenue or 10th Avenue in Myrtle Beach, right in front of the police department. And as they all kind of congregated in that area, and were still peaceably assembling, all of a sudden, there was a shift.
Yeah, and what's crazy is when you watch the videos, you see the police, they block off the street so everybody could be in the street, right? They block off the street. And all the protesters they weren't even in the street. They were like in the bike lane and then in front of the police department on the sidewalk. But like the shift changes, and what really brings about that catalyst is all of a sudden, you've got 100 police officers come out in riot gear. And it hasn't been, when I watch the videos, I'm seeing them huddling around and praying, right?
Because what's so hard when you're watching the videos is you sit down and you think back to 2 years ago, because now that we're kind of further away from that time, you kind of forget where exactly we were on May 31st of 2020. But where we were was 6 days prior, there was a black man who was on camera being assaulted by a police officer. He sat on this man's neck for, they debate, but at least 8 minutes. And this man cried out for his dead mother. and told this officer over and over that he could not breathe.
Right.
And this officer continued to kneel on his neck until this man died. Mm-hmm. And now we can say, we know for sure that this police officer was convicted of murder. Mm-hmm. He murdered this man. But because of social media and because this was all recorded, we as Americans saw it happen. And I'm going to tell you, I still to this day cannot watch it. I cannot watch it all the way through to the end. So, people start congregating and they're protesting, which we have the right to do, our constitutional right to do. I think we so often talk about our constitutional rights and Second Amendment, and we want to have our guns and all of that. But what we also need to remember is that we have the ability to peaceably assemble and to tell our government when we have a problem. And that's what people were doing. And yet in response to that, you have officers coming out in riot gear, in military fatigues, with helmets on, with shields up protecting them. They've got machine guns and assault rifles for these peaceable protests. Mm-hmm. And what do you think that did to the tensions?
Yeah, it raised them.
Okay. And as individuals, our clients are being arrested for no reason, for standing on a sidewalk, which is a public place.
Well, is that what happened?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They just started.
And this is verified by video.
Oh, it's all on video.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So they just randomly started arresting people for being there, not doing anything.
So I think that was like the shift, and like we went from like praying and like laying quietly in the street, because that was like the protest that we saw across the country, is that like people just laying down, right?
Right.
We saw that. I mean, in Denver, police officers were laying with them. I mean, it was like really powerful stuff, because it was quiet, but it like meant so much, right? Like we should be able to like lay and not have someone kneel on our neck.
Right.
So this is like basic humanity. Mm-hmm. And we see an officer kind of lose his shit, and he shoves a kid and knocks him to the ground, and then 5 officers pile on top of him, and that's when the arrests just start happening. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because and this is they all knew better. Like, these are people who are trained, right? And they lost it. And that was like, that was the real catalyst to how this kind of like all the arrests started happening after all these officers come out and with machine guns and military fatigues. And, there's this talk of like, let's go less lethal. Let's go less lethal? Are you kidding me? Like, we can throw a triple chaser. Look, we hear comments of police officers. We need a good old fire truck to come barreling through here.
When life gets ugly, justice is love.